Haymitch Abernathy, my second favorite character in the Hunger Games trilogy. It goes Buttercup, and then Haymitch, and then everyone else. Before Katniss, Everdeen, and Peeta Bread pulled the whole, we're gonna eat poisonous berries, and you know, actually, I'm just gonna stop myself right there, because I feel like there's some of you out there who are probably tragically asking yourselves, who in the heck is Buttercup? Well, to waste a lot of your time, Buttercup is the world's ugliest cat. Katniss's words, not mine. And speaking of Katniss, Buttercup didn't like Katniss too much, and I don't really understand why. It's not like Katniss tried drowning Buttercup in a bucket the first time that Prim brought him home. Though wait, that's exactly what happened. Besides having the remarkable ability of not drowning, this cat has the incredible ability of morphing into a completely different cat after the first Hunger Games movie. Buttercup may be flea-ridden, but he's fiercely loyal to Primrose. The first time that Prim saw this majestic tiny lion, she immediately fell in love with it and wanted to take it home. Well, on the other hand, someone like Katniss saw this adorable little garbage kitten with a belly swollen with worms and covered in fleas and was like, it's the bucket for you. Katniss's reasoning for bucket time was that she didn't want another mouth to feed. But Prim was crying and she was like, please, Katniss, let me keep the cat. If you don't let me keep this cat, you're gonna be my 13th reason why. So very reluctantly, Katniss kept Buttercup alive. And Buttercup actually ended up being pretty useful. He would scoop up vermin, mice, and even sometimes rats. I think what somewhat repaired their severely dysfunctional relationship was Katniss feeding Buttercup the entrails of whatever she hunted in the woods that day. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna timestamp the video just in case I go on another incoherent rant. Before I ruin your day, I think it's a good time to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. For those who aren't in the know, BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service that is 100% online. Look at it. As of recently, I really gravitated towards mindfulness and self-care given the dour subject matter that I talk about and basically the fact that I'm a content creator. So I think therapy is pretty cool. And for anyone wanting to seek out a therapist, it can be pretty hard finding the right one. But don't worry, because BetterHelp is out here with 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists, that's a really big number. BetterHelp over here, this thing. Their mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. And the accessibility is pretty great because you can talk to your therapist over text, chat, video call, voice call, just whatever you feel in the mood to do. And I know some of you out there are probably like, wait a second. How do you get started? It's actually really easy to get started. All you have to do is answer this questionnaire, talking about what your needs and preferences in therapy are. That way they can look in their network of 30K and then pick the most compatible one. So you get the most personalized therapist. And once you get matched, you can contact your therapist whenever. And if you want to be more organized, you can schedule live sessions whenever it's convenient for you. Remember like 15 seconds ago when I was talking about how challenging it can be trying to find the right therapist? And for anyone wanting to seek out a therapist, well, BetterHelp gets that. And if you're feeling like your therapist is pretty neat, but they're just not the right fit for you, you don't have to worry because you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. And on top of that, you're getting more flexibility and you're getting a more affordable price, which is pretty great. So if you want to begin your journey with BetterHelp, click on this link in the description below, the one that has my name on it. That way you're gonna get 10% off your first month. So go check it out. Anyway, who is this video about again? Not Buttercup, but oh yeah, Haymitch Abernathy. In the book The Hunger Games, the official illustrated movie companion, producer Nina Jacobson talked about the casting for Haymitch's character, claiming we wanted a character who felt like he'd seen it all and experienced it all and had that weariness, but also that subversive, fiery unpredictability. We wanted someone who could play the drunk without being really obvious about it, who could play that sort of broken down clown, but really had the intelligence and the foresight and the strategy to get these two characters through these games. So they chose Woody Harrelson to play this very stoic and classy and well put together individual, and they never looked back. In the same book, it's also written that Woody Harrelson claimed it isn't always the case when you're in a constant state of laughter and merriment on set, but it was on this set. That has absolutely nothing to do with the point that I'm trying to make right now, but I like that fact. So before Katniss and Peeta Bread pulled the whole, we're gonna eat poisonous berries and die in front of all of Panem as a big f you to the Capitol, forcing President Snow to let 2 victors win instead of the usual uno, Haymitch was the only living victor of District 12. well, besides Lucy Gray Baird, but nobody really knows where she is. So let's start with Haymitch's origin. When he was 16 years old, Haymitch was called into a thing called the Hunger Games. To be specific, the 50th Hunger Games. And to be even more specific, the second Quarter Quell. Quick refresher for those in the back of the class, the Quarter Quell is just another way for the Capitol to ruin everyone's day. Every 25 years, the Quarter Quell introduces a twist to the Hunger Games. When they're not being burned by Plutarch Heavensbee, the Quarter Quells are written down on these cards and stored in secret boxes that are kept in this undisclosed location somewhere in the Capitol. When the laws for the games were laid out, probably sometime during Snow's game maker internship, they would call for a glorified version of the games to make fresh memory of those killed by district rebels. When analyzing this deleted scene of Plutarch pulling his usual shenanigans, I decided to dedicate my life to counting the boxes in this very ominous looking room. And after 7 hours, I counted around 80 boxes, meaning they planned out the Quarter Quells for the next 2,000 years. That's just assuming the boxes stop at this point. They could keep going, people. And I'll give them credit. The cards are very headache inducing. During the first Quarter Quell, the Quarter Quell twist served as a reminder to the rebels that their children were dying because of their choice to initiate violence. So they made every district hold an election and vote on which child would represent it. During the second Quarter Quell, also known as the year that Haymitch was in the games, as a reminder that 2 rebels died for each capital citizen, every district was required to send twice as many tributes. Imagine dedicating like all this time to creating hundreds of Quarter Quell cards and then only 3 of them get used. But Plutarch did end up burning the 3rd actual card. So I guess only 2 real cards got used at the end of the day. Haymitch was one of the 2 male victors selected from District 12, a place where they're building a better tomorrow, except they're really not. President Snow really had beef with District 12 for some reason, so he kept it in this ongoing 1920s nightmare. Haymitch was partnered up with an unnamed male tribute and an unnamed female tribute. So basically like 2 tributes that you don't need to care about, as they're just normal cannon fodder coming out of 12. But the one that you should care about is Maysilee Donner. Remember the pin? The golden pin. The golden Mockingjay pin that made everyone and their pink dogs lose their freaking minds, and how it became the symbol for the Second Rebellion. Well, this puppy originally belonged to Madge Undersea, who was the reluctant best friend of Katniss. Madge was the character that was completely forgotten about when they were writing the movies, which is weird because she's Mayor Undersea's daughter, and I'm pretty sure we see Mayor Undersea right here. And an important detail, and the reason why I'm talking about Madge right now, is that Madge's aunt was Maysilee Donner, the best friend of Katniss's mother, Miss Everdeen. Or just a friend. I don't know how close they were, but Miss Everdeen was holding the hand of Madge's crying mother at the time that Maysilee was being called up to the stage, so I'm assuming they were pretty close. The Quarter Quell twist for the 75th games was that they were going to reap from the pool of victors, so when at the Capitol, Effie requested a bunch of tapes of previous Hunger Games, so that Katniss and Peeta could look over them and see what potential victors they may be facing in the arena. It wasn't as straightforward as it was in the movies, when Haymitch could just show Katniss and Peeta all the victors in a slideshow.
What's with her teeth?
She had them filed into fangs so she could rip people's throats out.
When Katniss and Peeta are at this very awkward stage in their relationship, they're reviewing the tapes together. And then out of nowhere, Katniss comes across Haymitch's tape. The victor from the first Quarter Quell was most likely dead because it happened so long ago. So the only other Quarter Quell that they got for reference was Haymitch. K and P thought that viewing Haymitch's tape would be a huge invasion of his privacy, even though it's a tape of a public event that was previously broadcasted to all of Panem, but they figured when in Rome, or in this case, when in a Roman-inspired dystopian capital. The Reaping. Remember when like 5 seconds ago I mentioned that the 50th Hunger Games had twice as many tributes? Katniss became overwhelmed by the amount of names being called to their doom. She was really going through a roller coaster of emotions because when they called Haymitch, she found it hard to admit, but she thought he was quite the looker. The Parade. Haymitch and the other tributes from 12 were dressed in these very stupid looking coal miner outfits, and I'm assuming that the chariot was pretty packed. Oh my gosh, we're here. The interviews. Like Katniss, Haymitch is interviewed by the great, the excitable Caesar Flickerman. He didn't even look that different. He was slightly younger and he was rocking dark green hair eyelids, but apparently he had different lips. So I'm assuming he got plastic surgery to make him look younger because it's the superficial capital. During their interview together, Flickerman questions Haymitch. So Haymitch, what do you think of the games having 100% more competitors than usual? Then Haymitch shrugs and responds, I don't see that it makes much difference. They'll still be 100% as stupid as usual. So I figured figure my odds will be roughly the same. This actually caused the audience to laugh and, dare I say, find Haymitch likable. Everything seemed like it was going okay for Haymitch. Until the games. Day 1. The 47 tributes and Haymitch rise from the stockyard into the arena in order to be overwhelmed by the most breathtaking place imaginable. Imagine the Windows XP background, but like 4K. Katniss audibly gasped while watching the tape, so you can imagine how taken back the tributes were when seeing this arena in person. The middle of the arena, where everyone spawned from the tubes, that was a green meadow that was a few miles in diameter, and it was filled with meadows containing the most gorgeous flowers that the universe had to offer. Even the songbirds made an appearance. The sky kind of looked like how you used to view the sky as a kid before you had to get a job and compete in a dying economy. At the center of this circle of plates is the golden cornucopia. When creating the cornucopia for the 75th games, production designer Phil Messina claimed that they wanted to make the island, aka the cornucopia, an immediate symbol of what the tributes would face, something threatening and challenging. The cornucopia and catching fire was inspired by these two abandoned Soviet monuments. In fact, the architecture for the capital during the time of the 10th Hunger Games looked straight out of the Soviet Union. With that knowledge, I believe that the cornucopia during the second Quarter Quell would look something like this. One side of the meadow, there was woods, and on the opposite side of the meadow was a snow-covered mountain that was very suspicious. And did I mention that everything smelled great? When the countdown ends, some of the tributes don't even leave their plate, as they are so caught off guard by the beauty, the puffy white clouds, and of course, the smells. But Haymitch is unimpressed with the show and pulls a Peeta, where he runs directly into the woods. Meanwhile, Maysilee makes it out of the cornucopia with a small backpack and then runs in a similar direction. What's inside the backpack, you ask? She actually got some pretty good stuff. She got a bowl, some dried beef, and a blowgun with 24 darts. The beef was essential because everything, and I mean everything in the arena, was poisonous. The scent from the flowers, if inhaled too closely, poisonous. The water from the crystalline stream, if you drink it, poisonous. This arena is as toxic as my ex. The only thing that you could drink would be the rainwater, and the only thing that you could eat would be the food that was already placed at the cornucopia. Because if you pick one of those luscious fruits dangling from the bushes, and then you eat it, you're gonna be donezo. So the blow darts were actually a perfect weapon for Maysilee to have, because she could just dip the tip of those darts into any of the various poisonous flowers surrounding the arena. By the way, during this time, Haymitch becomes very familiar with using a knife, which is why he's completely unfazed when Katniss does this to him later on.
Pass the marmalade.
That is mahogany.
Moving on to days 2 and 3, the careers from districts 1, 2, and 4 form the largest career pack in the history of the Hunger Games, as they all collectively make up a party of 10. And then they all head to the mountain, a mountain that makes me very skeptical for some reason. Haymitch, staying as far away from the career pack as humanly possible, decides to vibe in the woods for a bit. Unfortunately, he runs into a more threatening pack, specifically a gang of threatening golden fluffy squirrels. And I know what you're thinking, but their fluffy exterior does not match their personalities. If you see this image in front of you, you turn and you run. The psychotic squirrels try to eat Haymitch, and then the butterflies join in the attack and they try stabbing Haymitch with their stingers, which is concerning because just like the tracker jackers from the 74th games, the butterfly sting could paralyze you or even make you stop living. And now we're on to day 4. The 4th day. The snow-covered mountain, the one that I rightfully had my reservations about this entire video, that was no ordinary dormant mountain. No, sister. It was a volcano. A volcano that had a proclivity for erupting. And it did. It erupted. In one eruption, it took out 12 tributes. The career pack that was hanging out a little bit too close to this volcano, their numbers got reduced by half. So they went from the largest career pack in history to a normal career pack. Liquid hot magma started to spew into the meadow, so the 13 remaining tributes were like, well, everything around us is burning due to the high volume of lava dispersed throughout the land. But the woods that Haymitch has been residing in this entire time seems like the one safe area where we won't be set aflame. So let's go there. At this point, Haymitch was trying to leave said woods, but there was a maze of hedges, like something out of The Shining, that he got turned around in. So he ended up leaving the woods and then doing a complete 180, back into the woods. All you have to know is that by the end of day 4, all the tributes were in the woods. Haymitch wound up in a battle between 2 normal tributes and a career tribute. He took out the 2 normies, but the 3rd remaining career was about to take him out. Out of nowhere, the resourceful Maysilee Donner shows up, and she's all like, poison-covered blow dart. And the career tribute's like, no, no. Surrounded by fallen tributes, Maysilee explains to Haymitch that they'd live longer if they worked together. And from that point, they became allies. Over the next few days, they work together, they fight together, as well as do stuff like salvage rainwater together, share food, take turns playing guard while the other rests, etc. And they make it to the final day. Haymitch was determined to get to the edge of the arena for some reason, so he and Maysilee ended up using a blowtorch taken from a fallen tribute to blowtorch their way through the hedges surrounding the arena. They finally get clear of everything and reach a cliff. And by this point in the games, there were only 5 tributes left, and they figured the games were ending soon. They thought it was best to split because they didn't want it to just come down to the 2 of them. Haymitch didn't thank Maysilee or even shake her hand. Not even an awkward high five. Maysilee just walks away, leaving Haymitch in his cliff. When goofing around, Haymitch accidentally kicks a pebble off the cliff. And about 60 seconds later, guess what returns? That pebble. He then throws a bigger rock off the cliff. Lo and behold, that rock flies back up into his hand. During his playtime, Maysilee Donner screams out in pain and agony because she just got stabbed in the throat by a huge freaking bird, specifically a skewer from a candy pink bird. Haymitch runs to her aid, but he's too late, and he stays there with her in her final moments. After that very depressing encounter, one tribute gets eliminated in a tussle with another tribute, and then that tribute gets eaten by the pack of fluffy squirrels, which is why we do not go near the pack of fluffy squirrels. The games come down to Haymitch and a District 1 tribute. Mind you, this career was massive. She was just as fast as Haymitch and much bigger. Haymitch and the career battle it out. By the end of it, the career is missing an eye, and Haymitch is disarmed, bleeding out, having to keep his internal organs from falling outside of his body. Needless to say, he ain't doing so hot. Haymitch was making a run for it, as the career was stumbling on after him. Both were moving at a snail's pace, but it was still pretty intense. The 2 finally reached the cliff that Haymitch was playing with earlier that day. When the career finally catches up to Haymitch, she throws an axe in his general direction in hopes of hitting him, but she misses as Haymitch collapses to the floor. Like the rock, the axe returns to the person who threw it, returning at the same velocity. So this axe goes directly back into the career's face. The axe is all like, hello. That nightmare may be over, but a new nightmare continues with Haymitch's victory tour. During the prep for the 75th Hunger Games, Peeta and Katniss were hanging out on the roof of the training center, a roof that was surrounded by the same force field that was in the arena of the 50th Games, as it was placed there to get the tributes back into the arena, making sure they couldn't just take themselves out of the equation. It was a way of keeping the tributes alive and imprisoned, and the Capitol never intended for this force field to be turned into a weapon. Apparently, Haymitch's stunt in the arena made the Capitol look stupid. So 2 weeks after he was crowned victor, Haymitch's girlfriend, his mother, and his brother were executed by Snow, making Haymitch an example for new victors like Johanna or Finnick to fall in line, or else everyone that they care about is gonna die. Fast forward like to the 74th Games, Haymitch had been partnered up with the team of the century, consisting of Effie Trinket, Cinna, and Portia. No one ever talks about Portia for some reason. Anyway, that's enough about Portia. Haymitch lives here, this place. I don't know which house he lives in exactly, so let's just say it's this one. Because why not? It's called Victor's Village, and as the name would suggest, it's a place where losers live. It's made up of 12 identical houses. According to Phil Messina, they wanted them all to be the same, like extravagant workers' housing. When I said losers, I wasn't just being malicious. It was my failed attempt to sound even more clever than I am, because even though Haymitch won the games, he didn't win. The games continued on, and this place became his purgatory. Oh, by the way, dourness aside, when they were trying to find the real-life location to film Victor's Village, the location scouts were like, we can't find one. So the production ended up building the housing exteriors from scratch. And then they added green screens to extend the village further out. Set decorator Larry Diaz entered the playing field as he claimed that Katniss's furniture was hand painted with a lot of flora and fauna, symbolic of Katniss and her love for the woods. It's very formal and elegant, but also hollow at the same time. She doesn't really use a lot of the house. For Peeta's house, the one that we never got to see. They did a more masculine version of Katniss's house, and for Haymitch's house, well, it's as if he dismantled the whole thing over the years since he won the games. It's this boozy, crazy mess. They say that the way you keep your home is a reflection of your mental health, and I think that we can make a safe assumption that Haymitch is doing good. Haymitch being one of the only 2 victors from 12 in all the 73 years of the Hunger Games, and the only non-missing one at the time, means that he was instantly thrown into the mentorship program. So before Katniss volunteered, he spent the past 23 years being forced into this role of mentor. We know that he was really good at it, but he just lost hope. With President Snow eliminating his family and the love of his life, and then forcing him into this lonely ghost town with nothing to do but dwell and wallow in his own misery and self-loathing year after year, and the only thing really giving him relief from this toxic environment is when he's dragged back out to the capital to relive past trauma and train more tributes to go into the games that he despises. You could say that he's become a little bitter. So Haymitch becomes a little codependent on drinking. This is a man who spent his adult life at the bottom of a bottle, trying to anesthetize himself against the capital's crimes. So when he says,
This mentoring is very taxing stuff.
It's his way of venting how he's trained 46 non-victors and failed at keeping them alive. We know Haymitch did not really express emotions, like his final goodbye with Maysilee, but there probably was a point where he became attached to tributes and maybe formed a bond, wanting to give them the proper advice to survive, but he's come to realize that there really is no point, and the odds are never going to be in their favor. So any amount of advice that he gives isn't going to help them. According to the Hunger Games tribute guide, Haymitch is often the source of entertainment when he arrives at the capital every year. However, even though he attracts attention to himself, he's not known for getting sponsors for his proteges. That was until he started caring again. The only friend Haymitch had was Chaff, the guy from District 11 who has a stump for a hand, as he lost it in the arena 30-something years prior to the events of Catching Fire. The capital could have easily given him a replacement hand, like how they gave Peeta a brand new leg after they had to amputate his older one, a fact that nobody is talking about. I guess Chaff wanted a reminder of what happened in the arena. Well, other than the severe psychological trauma, Chaff and Haymitch have a lot in common. They both have dark thoughts, they love drinking their worries away, they have a passion for being loud and making bad jokes at their own expense. They are truly perfect besties. During the 75th games, Haymitch tried to get Chaff and Cedar to become allies with Peeta and Katniss. And when in the arena, Chaff was killed by Brutus when he was protecting Peeta. I'm still pretty salty about this one because Brutus and Chaff were pretty buddy-buddy in the training center when they were throwing spears together, and then when they're in the arena, it's like none of that happened. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is that other than Chaff, Haymitch didn't really have any friends. When Katniss came along during the time in the 74th games, it reignited some compassion within Haymitch. And it makes sense too, because Haymitch was basically the male version of Katniss Everdeen. Both were highly intelligent individuals with little to no social skills. And on top of all of that, they both had similar experiences in the arena. They both formed alliances with someone that they actually kind of liked and got along with. And some may say that Haymitch and Maysilee weren't a love story like Katniss and Peeta, but I feel like one of the main reasons why Haymitch didn't say goodbye to Maysilee was because there was like some romantic tension there. And before you go off in the chat lecturing me all about how Haymitch must have definitely not been feeling that way towards Donner because he had a girlfriend back home, well, Todd, so did Katniss. Kind of. And Katniss still had a thing for Bread Boy. Haymitch could relate to Katniss in a way that nobody else could, as their experiences in the arena were so similar. Haymitch held Maysilee as she was bleeding out, just like Katniss holding Rue in her arms, being unable to save her. Plus, I feel like Haymitch's connection with Maysilee contributed to the whole crafting the Star-Crossed Lovers Act, resulting in Katniss and Peeta both winning the 74th games. Oh, by the way, remember like 5 years ago when I stated that President Snow was forced to let Peeta and Katniss live? Well, there's a lot of mirroring between the movie The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and the first Hunger Games, or as George Lucas would put it.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
So another case of this poetry, or history repeating itself, would be how back in the day, Snow had to convince Dr. Volumnia Gaul to let a tribute from 12 live when she really didn't want a tribute from District 12 to live. But then fast forward 64 years later, Snow would end up getting a taste of his own medicine, as he has to let 2 tributes live 5, who are tributes from District 12. That is twice as many tributes as Gaul, thus earning Snow double damage. But back to the entire reason we're making this video that's too long for its own good. Peeta initially got Haymitch to warm up to his tributes, but it was Katniss who reignited the fire within him. In Mockingjay, the book version, Katniss claimed that Snow had no leverage to use against Haymitch until she and Peeta came along. While it was true, Haymitch didn't acknowledge it. Heck, Haymitch's face was devoid of emotion when he was watching his BFF Chaff step onto the stage to participate in the 75th games. In the movies, however, you see more clear signs of how much he cares, like when Katniss is leaving for the arena, or one of my favorite moments right here when he's discussing strategy with his tributes. Haymitch puts his hand over the glass, signaling to the Avox that he's good on the drinks. He's saying no to the drinks because he wants to keep his mind clear for giving them advice. In Catching Fire, Haymitch even abstained from his normal consumption levels because he felt he owed it to Peeta to remain sober after Peeta did the whole
I volunteer as tribute.
I can't let you do that.
You can't stop me.
But Haymitch's sobriety lasted until they started watching his tape. And speaking of the 75th games, it's interesting to think that Haymitch was the only victor to be reaped during 2 Quarter Quells. But it was a good thing that he wasn't because of the whole colluding with District 13. Haymitch was recruited to join the Second Rebellion. We don't know the exact point in time he was recruited though. Haymitch hatched a plan with Plutarch Heavensby and all of District 13 to break Katniss out of the arena. But knowing how great of an actor Katniss was,
Panem today, Panem tomorrow.
and with everyone in the nation watching her in the games, Haymitch had to keep Katniss out of the loop, rightfully keeping her in the dark about this super secret plan. But Haymitch promised Katniss that he would look out for Peeta, but Peeta got captured by the Capitol, and instead Katniss was prioritized. So Katniss was pretty upset, to say the least.
Yes!
And Katniss didn't really speak to Haymitch after that. She didn't start speaking to him again until they were getting ready to film the propos. But over time, Katniss and Haymitch accepted that they both could have done more to save Peeta. And the line of communication opened back up again. Haymitch and every single person on the planet realized that Katniss was a terrible actor. So he brings in a focus group consisting of Greasy Say, Gale, and other survivors of Snow finally letting District 12 have it, so that Haymitch can ask them individually what moment during the past 2 years did Katniss inspire them. What Haymitch proves by doing this is that Katniss needs to go out into less active areas of the war in order to give her authentic reaction to what's happening. Within this time, Haymitch becomes her willing mentor and her coach. So if it wasn't for Haymitch, the whole Mockingjay wouldn't have worked. Remember that moment in Mockingjay Part 2 where Coin has a really nice idea where she calls the remaining victors in for a little meeting to vote in favor or against having the Hunger Games reboot with the Capitol's lima beans? Well, before the meeting of the council, Katniss wanted to speak to Haymitch and be all like, hey, so low key, I think Coin may have blown up Prim, but before she could even get started on that, she asks Haymitch for help. But Haymitch mocks her and goes like, are you asking about boy trouble again? Prompting Katniss to storm out. Haymitch tried to get Katniss to come back because he recognized that he was deflecting with humor and that Katniss was trying to be vulnerable. Any other day, Haymitch would of course vote against the Hunger Games, given that everything we've been talking about, but he looks at Katniss when she votes yes. Katniss, aware that Haymitch is watching her, thinks to herself, this is the moment then, when we find out how exactly alike we are, and how much he truly understands me. So when Haymitch votes with the Mockingjay, it confirmed how much they were alike and how much he truly cared about her. Effie and Haymitch. I am ready to talk about Effie and Haymitch. Their relationship is a perfect blend of capital and district. They come from very different worlds, obviously, and this is perfectly represented by their clothing. Costume designer Trish Somerville talked about the way that she wanted to dress Haymitch. He's a victor, so he gets his clothes from the capital, and they're chic and they're streamlined. We use textural fabrics to make garments that are modern, but with a relaxed feel. Still, there's always something kind of wrinkly about him, or his color's not quite buttoned right. He's willing to wear these clothes, but he's gotta do it on his own terms. This vibe even escalates all the way to the top of his head. When it comes to the hair designer Linda Flowers, she commented on Haymitch's hair, saying that he was given the District 12 look, all grown out, like he's not maintaining himself anymore. It's scraggly and longer and a little sad. Well, on the other hand, Effie is always looking perfect. She is consistently maintaining her looks and makeup. Even in moments of pure distress and chaos, Effie is still looking her absolute best as she fully embraces the overindulgent fashion trends of the capital. Effie was someone who was assigned to 12, the worst district. She didn't pick it. It's an anomaly for someone like Cinna to request District 12 because of just how irrelevant it is. By the way, District 12. So Effie was kind of like the not popular kid trying to become respected and flourish in the capital's culture, but she's paired with the laughing stock of Panem. The first time we see him in the books, Haymitch is called onto the stage during the reaping, and he very drunkenly tries to give Effie a big ol' hug. And in this moment, she's like, I hate my life. I hate my life. And then Haymitch does a quirky thing like falling off the stage and then vomiting in front of her. This may sound shocking, but these two right here, these two people surprisingly disagreed on a lot. But when it came to important stuff, like doing what's best for their tributes, they didn't really question each other. For example, there was this one moment during the 75th games when all the tributes had to present their special abilities to the game makers and Plutarch and all these other people. Haymitch told Effie not to escort Peeta and Katniss to the waiting room because it would make them look weak due to the fact that everyone else was an adult by now and they didn't need an escort. And Effie was like, okay, fine, I'm not gonna do it. So they did share some respect for each other. By the way, apparently Meg's special talent that year was taking a nap for 15 minutes. Effie never had a victor from her district. So at first she was living her dream. She wasn't given just one, she was given 2 victors. And she was so pumped to show them off. But then suddenly a year later, her victors are turned back into tributes and are reaped again, and then sent into their almost certain death. The actor who plays Effie, Elizabeth Banks, talked about her character in this moment. When the Quarter Quell happens, Effie feels robbed of something very close to her heart. She's certainly a creature of her world, but now she's getting to see it from a different angle and have her eyes open.
Well, you both deserved so much better.
Effie's clothing had to be ridiculous because she was going to be the first capital citizen that we see in the films. Her clothing represents shallow lifestyles and dumb fashion trends of the capital, but this fashion doesn't reflect the sensitive side of her character, especially when Effie's capital pride wavers when her 2 victors are sent back into the arena. Trish Somerville goes on to add some complexity to Effie's character, saying that there's this level of her that's really fun and bubbly, but there's also this part that suffers for fashion because that's how she deals with being part of the capital. She's restricted and not really free to be who she is. Just to add on to that, Effie's clothes are as uncomfortable as they look, which speaks to that other side of her character, the part of her that can't get comfortable in the capital. Kind of like how the Avoxes, the people who are forced to be servants in the capital, have these headpieces that give off the appearance of an abstract cage with ghoul makeup underneath, emblematic of their imprisonment. Plutarch and Haymitch had a really difficult time keeping Effie alive during the war. Like, Haymitch fought to keep her alive. By the end of the Second Rebellion, Katniss's prep team was the only team left alive. Even though Effie significantly contributed to the Mockingjay probos and made them freaking lit, Coin, rebel leaders, and the rest of the higher-ups in 13 would appreciate her much less than the rest of us do. It's cool to think that, like, Haymitch truly cared about Effie at the end of the day, so I liked how they added the whole Haymitch and Effie kissing each other at the end of Mockingjay Part 2 in the cinematic retelling of the story. The war was over, and what better way to show a more peaceful merger between capital residents and district borns than having these 2 polar opposites get together. Katniss takes inspiration from her family plant book and begins a project constructing a new book commemorating those who lost their lives during the Second Rebellion. Oh, and for those who are out of the loop, Katniss had this book of plants that was passed down from generation after generation on her mom's side of the family because they were all herbivores, or whatever you call people who run apothecary shops. Regardless, Katniss began writing this new book talking about the atrocities of the capital, the Hunger Games, and the lives lost during all of that. Haymitch wanted to contribute to the book by listing the name of every single tribute he was forced to mentor over those 23 years. And when it came to his life after the war, Haymitch joins a few hundred people who returned to District 12 in order to rebuild it. And then he goes back to his Victor's village home and then ends up drinking again, putting himself in a similar situation as before, but this time, he's raising geese. When Katniss was making a comment about how well Haymitch was taking care of these geese, she claimed that, fortunately, the geese can take pretty good care of themselves.